This OTA is legitimately insane. No, it's not clickbait. This is one of the biggest we've seen in a while, not just from the number of cards being changed, which is significant, but the fact that we're buffing some old classics that have seen almost no play. But most importantly, we're buffing some new stuff that's seeing near constant play. And specifically, we got to talk about Surtur. And it's not just Surtur. There are 3 cards being changed in that entire shell. The entire Surtur shell is being rewritten. And I think the reason why you have to do this and consider why Marvel Snap's dev team is approaching it this way is because Surtur in its shell, despite the fact that when it was released as a season pass card, we knew it was going to be cracked. We're like, man, this card is stupid. And it crushed for a while. It saw some nerfs, it saw some changes. Very notably, Skaar got toned down, Surtur got toned down. Goliath was changed from a 6'10 to a 6'9, nice, but ultimately, like, it's not gonna be part of the Surtur shell anymore. Because when you had Surtur and you gained initiative and you hit it with Goliath, it was soul crushing for your opponents. So things changed. Ultimately, Surtur kind of just fell out of the meta. People stopped playing it. It was probably always great, but people just stopped playing it. There was always new shiny things coming. And then Ares came out, and people started playing Surtur again because Ares was a very natural inclusion, and suddenly Surtur completely took over. And not just took over the higher echelons of MMR or the higher brackets of ranks, it was across the entirety of Marvel Snap because this archetype is so straightforward to play. Like, it's kind of brilliant the way it plays. It's so straightforward and easy. It was destroying the entire meta across all stages, right? It wasn't just an isolated problem like we had in the prior OTA where it's like, well, the very top of the meta, this Frigga move deck is kind of nuts, so yeah, we'll tone it down a bit. Like, no, this is across the entire game. And it's not just Surtur, who, by the way, I should mention, goes from a 3-5 and remains a 3-5, that when after you play a card with 10 or more power, you'd gain +3 power twice per game. Notably, this would bring it to 11 power, which would bring down Skaar to be free. Like, it would impact Skaar's ability, but not free unless you had other 10 power cards. But Surtur would be contributing to the Skaar discount. Now it's a 3-5 that when you play 10 or more power, it actually gains +2. And that means that it needs an additional activation to get to that Skaar discount. So it's legitimately harder. Yes, it scales better. Well, it shouldn't because it doesn't really scale better. The old one was +3, now it's +2, but it scales infinitely. However, there's only so many 10 power cards you can play in a single game, right? Especially when this comes out on 3. So this was a very significant nerf, but most importantly, it impacts Skaar's ability to be discounted because you had these like crazy impactful turn 6 plays that were explosive. You can impact multiple locations. Meanwhile, you're playing Skaar and Surtur still going higher, right? So that was kind of the major thing that was happening. So Surtur's getting hit. It was running a huge meta share across all MMRs, and it's not just Surtur because this is insane. And believe it or not, Skaar is going from a 6'10 to a 7'12. We have the first ever 7 power. I should not say that. Airsham 7 power. Yeah, Airsham 7 power. But that's okay. We have a second 7 power card. And it was only a matter of time before we saw another one. But I didn't expect it to be Skaar. We have a 7-12 stat line. Still costs 2 less for each card that has 10 or more power. The 7's important because now it's very hard to get it to 0, which what it almost always was with a Skaar deck. Or a Surtur deck, I should say. So this is crazy. It is coming down in the series drop. They have noted that. I think that when it was in the caches, people were kind of attacking it as well because Surtur was relevant, if I remember correctly. So it's one of those things where it's like, man, it kind of sucks because not only has Surtur changed, but now Skaar is completely different as well. Although it's got more power, the combo was significantly harder to get off. It's going to be way less consistent because it was funny with Thaddeus Ross. Like, you almost felt like, we don't need Thaddeus Ross in the Surtur shells because, you draw your cards anyway. Like, it's so consistent. And now you have to hit your marks in order to pull off the Surtur Skaar combo. So as a result, does Thaddeus Ross get better because of this change? Like, is he more important to this deck? I don't know. I have to test it, but this is very significant of a change. And it's not even the last one to the Surtur shell. Because, and this is important, note that Surtur and Skaar were roughly the same win rate and roughly the same meta share. There was a card in that shell that's running a significantly higher meta share, and that is going to be Aero, because Aero's being played in the Scream decks as well. Not only that, Aero's being played in Scream decks, it's being played in Surtur decks, and then it was being played in hybrid decks that had Surtur and Scream in it, which is literally just crazy. And that is when they were like, nope, we can't have this. It's cool to make hybrid versions of different decks, but once you really get into the weeds of it, Aero was just overperforming for too many shells. 5'10 goes to a 5'9, still the same effect. It's unfortunate. Aero, I feel like we just started playing Aero again. No, that's not true. It's been a couple months. Aero probably had to get changed, let's be honest with you. I'm exaggerating a little bit, as YouTubers tend to do. But what I will say is that, like, did this catch me by surprise? Kinda. This is a lot of changes to a single archetype. Like, in my head right now, like, I've played some Surtur, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't even know what that deck looks like now with all the changes. And I think we're going to have to try to approach it in a lens of, like, it just doesn't play the way it used to. Like, it kind of does, but you're going to have to you're going to have to hit your marks a little more effectively, and Skaar might not be free, right? So there might have to be alternative ways to try to get some additional value from a deck like that, because now, like, some major parts, like Goliath doesn't work in that deck now, Aero doesn't work in that deck now. You only have so many 10 power options, right? Like, really, you only have so many 10 power options. And this is actually a nerf to Thaddeus, because that's one more card that Thaddeus can't pull. So pretty interesting changes overall, and again, I think very significant to the meta, because it's going to impact the entire spectrum of player base, because everyone was playing Surtur decks, and for the most part, they were playable across all MMR brackets. And so I think it's going to be a very impactful change. Talking about impactful changes, we got a couple of balance changes in this patch, and Werewolf by Night is the first. This card has seen almost no play. I think part of it is that it's very awkward, especially with the way that, like, you know, we're filling boards a lot right now. I don't know about you, but it feels like Marvel Snap specifically lately has felt like you don't have a lot of space, especially with Sanctorum, like the new mode. It's like you can't play Werewolf by Night. You're constantly contesting for different spaces and stuff like that, different locations. It's hard to have something bouncing around, occupying space, moving when you don't want it to. Of course, it can work to your advantage, but it's kind of tricky. It's cumbersome. And moving into a 3/3, I think, is a good start. Remember, there was a point in time where Werewolf by Night was the best card in Marvel Snap. And so it does not have crazy scaling, but it is a 3-drop that does scale effectively, has the mobility, and just might, need that extra power. And it probably does, because it's seen absolutely no play. It is seeing so little play that the win rate is non-indicative of what its power is, because literally no one's trying it. And so Werewolf by Night, unfortunately, in real rough shape, but getting an additional power should help it, and it's not the last thing that Bounce is going to be getting in this set. Annihilus. They do mention that Annihilus is risky to buff. Is this back to its original stat line? Was it always 5/7 or was it 5/8? I think it was always 5/7, right? I don't remember. It might have been 5/8. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Someone will say it in the comments. I'm having a hard time remembering what the OG Annihilus was. But 47% win rate, almost less than 1% kind of meta share. That's crazy for a card that's been remarkable. The right to identify that Viper has honestly outclassed it for some time, especially since the Viper change, and it's almost like a rework to some degree. It's not really a rework, it's just a change, text change. But Clog is problematic, and we just finished saying with Werewolf by Night that, hey, it feels like we don't have as much space as we used to. Well, Clog destroys Werewolf by Night with exactly that, right? All the clogging, and you can't move things around, and it makes the board control and the macro consideration of playing something like a Werewolf by Night awkward. So Annihilus you have to keep in check, because the game felt awful when it was just Sentry Annihilus gameplay nonstop, right? Oh, and Sentry got buffed last OTA too, keep that in mind. So ultimately with Annihilus, I think it needed something, but I can see this card getting nerfed again, because if Clog gets too popular, especially this version of Clog, and there's a chance we have to kind of get some confirmation on how it works, but you got the first Ghost Rider, that deck might want to run goblins and stuff like that, and you just start junking stuff over, and then you can use Annihilus, right? So pretty interesting card. I actually love Annihilus. I think he's an archetype definer. I believe he's one of the ones dropping as well March 4th, and so keep an eye on him. Nice to see someone getting a little love here, especially one of the OG classics. He's not an OG classic. What am I talking about? Sorry, it's like the middle of the night here. He's not an OG classic. He's a card I like. So there's that. Okay, talking about OG classics, I can actually use that term now. White Queen. This has been a card that has been literally on my thumbnails for Snapchats where, like, these cards suck, buff these cards. White Queen has dodge getting buffed or changed, it seems like, for years, which is crazy. 4/6, ironically, when Marvel Snap first came out in beta and in the early days, it actually felt like, hey, at least I'm getting good stats. 4/6 was good stats. Can you believe that? White Queen's effect was just kind of, associated with, it's fine. I get some scouting, but I just really want those stats. Man, has power creep been a thing. But it goes from a 4/6 to a 3/4 that still copies the highest cost card from your opponent's hand. And they do mention in the developer note, it's talking about Aeson and Starbrand and the prehistoric heroes. Now, Aeson's interesting because specifically, it is almost like a Jubilee for cards that are being generated in your hand, resulting in, it's 6 costs, so you have to, like, ramp it out or something. You got to get it out somehow. And then every turn, it's going to bring down a card that you've that you've generated in your hand, right? So obviously White Queen could feed that machine to allow it to, you copied something big, like whether it's Doctor Doom or something, and then Isan brings it down, right? So having White Queen being changed is a net buff to something like an Isan. Could White Queen make it into a Surfer deck? Probably not. Like it's still not that good as a 3/4, right? It provides good scouting. What it will do though is it might work well with Victoria Hand. Will it replace something like a Coulson for Victoria Hand? Possibly, right? Time will only tell. It was seeing absolutely no play, and you'd love to see Series 1 cards get changed too, right? Early cards getting changed. Everyone has them. Everyone gets the benefit. So White Queen, you'll love to see it. Now this is hilarious to me, and I joke about it all the time on the Snapchat. When they nerfed Lizard originally, making the -4 power, because it used to be -3, they nerfed Lizard and they said it was the least significant nerf they've ever done, and the card completely died. It disappeared, and I called it on that day when they did the nerf. I was like, this is actually a significant nerf, going from -3 to -4. This card is dead in the water. No one's ever going to play it again, and it basically saw absolutely no play since. Now it goes from a 2/5 to a 2/6. 2/6 is pretty good. Keep in mind we have Starbrand coming out as well. 0 Enchantress style decks are going to make a comeback with Starbrand, and now you got Lizard. And it made me wonder, I'm like, was Starbrand not good enough? Was Starbrand not good? Like, it seems good, right? But generally good is, of course, if you get Sauron and stuff. But that whole list, those lists that were kind of using like the Suri Shauron type stuff, and they lost the Taskmaster play because you can't use, like, you do like Shuri into... you played Sauron on 3, Shuri on 4, you'd play Red Skull on 5, and then on 6 you would play the Taskmaster to copy the Shuri'd Red Skull, and then you'd also play like an Ebony Maw that's had its thing removed. And at some point in time you have like Lizards and stuff as well. But you can't really do that anymore because Taskmaster is no longer 5-drop. And so things have really changed, but we're going to see Zero and Sauron making a major comeback, and Lizard's going to be a part of that, I think. 2/6, that's a stat line I think that's worth working for, especially when you consider what Maximus is, right? So Lizard, there's a little bit of hope. And the floor is a little higher, which is important, right? It's at its worst, it's a 2/2, which is way better than a 2/1, by the way. Then we get High Evo. High Evo is a card that you never want to play if it's in your deck. Like you play High Evo because you want everything else. And what's interesting is we're seeing a lot of changes in High Evo. Like I've actually released a video, like even with my Laufey video that I released yesterday, it was kind of a review of all 3 cards, but Laufey was in it. High Evo was in it, but not being played in the traditional way with like Sunspot and Cyclops and all that stuff. It was being played for Abomination and Wasp. Or it was being played in a different deck I was doing with like The Thing. You weren't floating energy. You were actually just using the debuff potential to get Diamondback to work or to get Laufey to work or whatever, right? So High Evolutionary is in a very interesting spot right now. He's not seeing a lot of play. Decent win rate at 52% on aggregate, 3% meta share. You'd probably expect it to be a little higher. But now he's a 4/7. And I almost think, going back in time, again, someone can correct me in the comments, I think he was data mined originally as a 4/7. And then he was changed and nerfed to a 4/5 or something. And then when they had to nerf the cards, because he was completely cracked, they nerfed Wasp, they nerfed the Thing, because the Thing just used to do 3 procs no matter what. Now he does 3 different targets. So High Evo has seen a lot of changes. Now he's back to the 4/7. He might have even been 4/8, honestly. It might have been 4/8 as a data mine. I don't even remember. It's been so long. I've been playing way too much Marvel Snap lately. But I actually love High Evo. Like, Evo's been one of my favorite archetypes, and I've always been coping, trying to make them work. And even with Luna Snow, I actually think Luna Snow makes this deck better, and every OTA seems like it's giving a little extra love to High Evo. So I think it's an archetype they're watching. It feels like it's getting closer and closer. Obviously, Bruce Banner sucked. That card's unplayable garbage, but maybe they approach Bruce Banner next and maybe make him a bit of a better card. But again, we're not even playing Evo in a way where we're floating energy right now. We're just using the abilities. So pretty cool to see Evo getting a little bit of love and a little bit of a change. This surprised me. It's interesting here because so we had the Werewolf by Night change. Now, Joaquin Falcon decks were not running Werewolf by Night. I probably don't think they would. But in my testing, I liked this card. The only challenge was, as a 3/4, it was hard to slot into the decks because it felt a little slow, because it was just like, okay, well, you're turn 3 and like you got to set up, and then you start pumping, and then like by that time, then you start bouncing. Now it's turn 5, and you're like, what's going on? Like, I'm running out of space. I want to get things moving quicker. At a 2-drop, it becomes significantly easier to combo with. Even if you consider that you can play this on 2 and then on 3 play something into it in like Toxin, and then do something else, or you can beast it. Now it's a 1 cost, which combos better. Like, this cheaper Joaquin Falcon is actually amazing. We were getting good hits and some carries from things like Nico, Rocket Raccoon. Like, these are things that like to play over and over again. And when you get an effect like Silver Sable proccing multiple times, those cards get big and they start to carry the game on their own. So this change is significant, especially with Bounce, because Bounce wants to get like that extra value from an energy perspective, where you can just make those turns a little tighter and a little more impactful, a little faster. So this is a huge change, in my opinion, massive change. And I think Second Dinner recognizes that because it has a 2/2 stat line. It's a little underrated for a 2 cost because you're getting such a high value play. So Joaquin Falcon, I think, is really good, especially as a 2/2. And that's going to take us to our end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I sincerely appreciate it. I love every one of you guys. Honestly, you make my dream come true every time you watch a video. Hit that like button if you haven't hit it already, and we'll see you on that next one.